I'm certain this is going to be the most controversial video on this channel, but it's a topic that needs to be discussed. At some point, we've all watched The Fairly Odd Parents and know the story of Timmy Turner, a 10-year-old boy with a rough life until he receives two fairy godparents, Cosmo and Wanda. Their job is to grant his every wish, provided he doesn't break the rules or until he turns 16. With that context in mind, let's dive into the big question. Who thought it was a brilliant idea to create a live-action version of this beloved show? And with a 23-year-old Timmy, no less. The movie was far from well-received, yet somehow did well enough for Nickelodeon to greenlight a full trilogy, which flew under the radar and, in my opinion, is a complete disaster. I can't believe these films are even considered part of the series canon. By making this video, I'm doing you a favor. Trust me, rewatching this trilogy is not worth it. So let's reminisce about the worst trilogy ever made for The Fairly Odd Parents. The first movie, Grow Up Timmy Turner, or as I prefer to call it, Get a Job Already, Timmy is celebrating his 23rd birthday. Played by Drake Bell, he has managed to bend the magical rules for years, staying a kid in order to keep his godparents. The premise itself is questionable, but luckily, one character is there to put a stop to it. Jorgen von Strangle. Known in the original series as the strongest fairy in the magical realm, Jorgen's portrayal in this movie is oddly erratic. Still, he's coherent enough to lay out the main conflict. Timmy needs to grow up and find a job, or he'll lose his godparents. Timmy, you're 23 years old. It's beyond belief that you've never been in love. If we really think about it, this justification doesn't hold up. One of the main recurring characters in the show was Trixie Tang, whom Timmy had an obsessive crush on. So, why does falling in love now, at 23, change anything? It seems to tie in with starting a family or growing up, but the movie doesn't clarify this. Instead, it shows a series of scenes where Timmy, played by Drake Bell, acts irrationally, manipulating everything just to avoid adulthood. His parents, who are tired of his antics, drop hints during breakfast about getting a job and even show him a house he could move into, but he refuses to change. At one point, Timmy's parents even sell their house to plan a world trip, only for Timmy to reverse the decision, ruining their plans just to spite them. He comes across as a completely unhinged character. But that's not even the strangest part. To keep his fairy godparents, Timmy has to keep going to school. Yes, you read that right. Even more bizarre, despite being 23, his new best friends are 10-year-old kids. That's undeniably creepy. For some reason, the only person who seems to find this odd is Mr. Crocker. While his character doesn't fully translate well to live action, at least they retained his original voice in the movie. Back to the main plot, Jorgen realizes Timmy is evading the rules and decides to force him to fall in love to make him lose his godparents. He shoots an arrow intended to make Timmy fall for the first person he sees, which could have gone horribly wrong since they're still in an elementary school. Thankfully, the arrow misses and instead makes a little boy become infatuated with the school mascot. Timmy is unaffected by this, but soon falls head over heels for a girl who walks by in slow motion while romantic music plays, making him crash his bike. Just like that, he's smitten and begins following her around town. This leads to a scene in the park where we meet Hugo Magnate Jr., the stereotypical spoiled rich kid bent on destroying the park to build a luxury hotel. Classic cliche. We quickly learn that the girl Timmy is infatuated with is an environmental activist who chains herself to a tree to stop the construction. Hugo, predictably, doesn't care and orders the tree to be cut down. Timmy, using his godparents, wishes for the machinery to break down, turns the chainsaws into balloons, and has a goat eat Hugo's pants to humiliate him. Hugo leaves and Timmy gets a moment alone with his newfound crush. The twist? It's Tootie, Timmy's long-forgotten childhood acquaintance. He strikes up a conversation, she hugs him, and then he abruptly runs off because, well, something unexpected happens with his pants. On the other hand, Hugo Magnate is in disbelief over the failure of his plan. Just then, he receives a call from a mysterious individual who claims they can solve his problem. This person turns out to be Crocker, who, to prove the existence of fairy godparents, shows Hugo some truly unsettling photos of Timmy, which are genuinely terrifying. The next day, Cosmo and Wanda, following their instincts, watch as Timmy experiences love for the first time, hinting at his readiness to move on from childhood innocence. This clashes with his desire to keep his fairy godparents forever. To navigate this conflict, Timmy initially tries to avoid Tootie, but when she asks him out, he surprisingly agrees. This is where I believe the movie takes an interesting turn. Instead of focusing on their original purpose of giving Timmy a wonderful childhood until he's ready to move on, Cosmo and Wanda shift gears. They start acting like a married couple trying to sabotage an adult's life to keep their child and maintain their family dynamic. It's quite odd, to be honest. They even transform into humans to meddle, adding a level of weirdness that borders on unsettling. What I appreciate, though, is that Timmy is the first to realize how wrong all of this is. Considering he's the least expected to come to such a realization, it's quite impactful. Let's face it, who wouldn't be tempted to bend the rules to keep fairy godparents forever? It's hard to blame him when you put yourself in his shoes. That's why his decision to confront his godparents and tell them to stop interfering makes his actions all the more commendable. Before leaving the restaurant, Timmy makes one final wish, that the park be restored to how it was when he and Tootie were children. This moment sets the stage for a scene that resonates with anyone who's experienced growing up and changing friendships. Timmy no longer seeks the company of his childhood friends. He's now in love and transformed into a more mature, devoted young man. It's a refreshing shift compared to staying perpetually stuck with a group of 10-year-olds. Then comes a pivotal moment. Timmy and Tootie are about to share their first kiss, but Timmy, afraid of losing his magical bond, backs away. It's important to remember there are still two villains on the loose. When a disappointed Tootie walks away, she spots an abandoned bunny and tries to save it, leaving her vulnerable and ultimately getting kidnapped in the most predictable way. It's almost darkly humorous how Cosmo and Wanda witness Tootie's kidnapping and simply laugh it off since she's no longer considered a problem. But then Poof steps in with a disapproving glare that makes them reconsider their actions. They finally decide to help, but their conversation is cut short when Mr. Crocker suddenly appears and captures the fairy godparents. Timmy's friends, who are nearby, inform him of the kidnapping. That's when Timmy realizes he must take action without magic, even though he knows he can't do it alone. This leads him to seek out Chester and AJ. Remember them? Chester and AJ were Timmy's best friends and standout characters in the original series. They've changed over the years, and the movie hints at how their friendship with Timmy faded as they watched him stay stuck in a perpetual state of childhood. They even joke about it as a way to cope with their own uneventful lives. Despite the distance, Chester and AJ remember the strength of their bond with Timmy. In the end, they set aside the years of separation and step up to help him. Well, technically, Timmy manages to persuade them with the promise of meeting girls, but still. Returning to Hugo Magnate Jr., he whisks Tootie away to his secret lair, the most terrifying place imaginable, the McDonald's amusement park. Here, he begins to unravel his villainous backstory, recounting a miserable childhood marked by an indifferent father. This neglect left him with an insatiable need to fulfill childish desires as a way to fill that emotional void. But wait, he doesn't have fairy godparents, so how are his wishes coming true? The answer is as twisted as it is simple: fairy godparent slavery. Meanwhile, Crocker finds himself betrayed and plunges into an endless pit. Hugo, consumed by his own ego, starts making increasingly absurd wishes, like giving himself a massive pecs without ever stepping into a gym, dressing up his assistant in an elaborate gown, and even creating a dancing robot to show off his moves. Timmy and his friends set out for Hugo Magnate's lair, and this part is particularly fun. True to form, they help Timmy purely out of self-interest, but the bond between them is evident. It's strong enough to take on any threat. Or so it seems. In a surprising twist, they abandon him, but not before reminding him to get them girlfriends. While there are fleeting moments that show potential, it's clear this movie desperately needed better screenwriters. Timmy ultimately enters the lair alone, ready for the climactic showdown with Hugo. He spots the machine used to drain wish energy from the fairies, a process that, if overused, would be fatal for them. It's a bizarre plan. After all, if Hugo wants to conquer the world, why kill off the source of his power? But then again, logic doesn't run deep in the mind of a madman. Timmy battles Hugo's robot in a fierce one-on-one fight, cleverly winning by removing its battery. He frees Tootie, and just when it seems they're safe, Hugo corners them, planning to annihilate them with the fairy's power. In a moment that subverts all expectations, Timmy saves the day by doing something most gamers dread: kissing a girl. This simple act disrupts the magical energy, causing it to dissipate. The rules of the magical world now recognize Timmy as an adult, which triggers Cosmo and Wanda's impending disappearance. It sets the stage for what could have been one of the most emotional, bittersweet goodbyes of our childhood. But did you really fall for that? The idea of Timmy letting go of his fairy godparents to grow up and start anew sounds poetic, but the writers had other plans. After Hugo's downfall and losing his empire, the movie shifts to Timmy and Tootie about to embark on a regular, magic-free life. Enter Jorgen, with news that turns everything upside down. In this universe, the magical world operates like an ever-watchful cult. The years Timmy spent holding onto his fairies have now become legendary. This revelation completely undermines the prior dramatic farewell. Farewell to one of the series' most touching moments, ruined. And Timmy is even allowed to keep his fairy godparents, provided his wishes aren't selfish. Yet, the first thing he does is fly off on a global trip in his magical van, ignoring everything that had just been said. Some people loved this movie, while many others hated it. Honestly, the fact that it even got made blows my mind. I get that the driving motivation is always the same, make as much money as possible, but when will they realize that this approach ends up ruining some of the best works out there? Taking the time to create a movie with a well-thought-out script and a satisfying ending would undoubtedly be more profitable in the long run, but they never seem to choose that path, and I just can't wrap my head around why. As for this Fairly OddParents movie, like I mentioned before, there are 2 sequels, forming a trilogy. Trust me, you're better off skipping them because it only goes downhill from here. The reality is, this trilogy had so much potential to be more thoughtfully developed and better executed. Anyway, that's all for this video. Take care everyone, and see you next time.